So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this event. Francesca, my colleague there, are we ready to go? If you want to give me the go-ahead, and we
are ready.
Kick it off. So, good morning, everybody who's on the line. My name is Susan Danger. I can see a range of people there, some who know me and some who don't. I am the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce to the EU, AmCham EU. And while actually I can see more people are connecting, so we kind of kick off the conversation by encouraging you to take part in the Slido poll. So if you haven't already done that, please just pick up your smartphone, go to slido.com, use the hashtag Life Sciences to connect. You can see that the slide was up earlier, and there's one question there. So it's very simple. I've just done it. Just click, and we're going to be reviewing the answers to that later. I would also like, just on a very practical level, to ask everyone if you could mute your microphones throughout the event, please. If you can, turn off your video, unless you're speaking, of course, to limit the connectivity issues that you may have. Please do turn it on if you're invited to ask a question by the moderator. And also, I encourage you to use the active speaker view, which is in the right-hand corner. That way you get better visibility of the panelists as they're speaking during the event. If you want to ask a question, please use the chat function, which is on WebEx, and feel free to ask any questions throughout the event. And you'll see some instructions are also coming up in the chat function now, in case you didn't catch what I just said. Finally, this event will be recorded, and it will be published on the AmCham EU website. So take a look at that afterwards. So with that, absolutely delighted to have the honor of being the one to open this event today. As I said, I'm the CEO of AmCham EU, and I know there are many people on the line, our members, many stakeholders from Brussels, but also around member states, I believe from the European Parliament as well, fellow associations, some hopefully some newbies, some potential members, and also many of my colleagues from around Europe, from what we call the ACE network, AmChams in Europe. And I'm also honoured this year to be the chair of that network in a different capacity, so welcome to you all. But as AmCham EU, just a few words, we represent 155 American companies invested in and committed to Europe. That's important. We're an apolitical and non-partisan organization. We have two overarching objectives. One is to build a stronger and more united Europe, which is essential. We're absolute supporters of the single market. And our second objective is to maintain and also strengthen the transatlantic relationship. So we certainly always have our work cut out for us here at AmCham. Now, today's context is indeed in the context of COVID-19, as we continue to face the health emergency and its social and economic consequences. The goals of this organization, we believe, remain as relevant as ever, if not more so. Before we dive into today's topic, I'd just like to say a few words about the current crisis, because over the last few weeks, we've highlighted several messaging, but we have three main messaging with regard to combating this crisis. One is solidarity. The EU's efforts to coordinate the response of member states. I can hear a bit of noise, actually. Can I just ask everyone to just check they're all on mute? Thanks very much. So firstly is solidarity. The EU's efforts to coordinate the responses of member states, absolutely key. We can see it now. We were just talking about borders opening earlier. Absolutely important that member states must continue to work together, also with regard to the economic recovery, of course. The second point is the single market. The crisis has demonstrated the absolute importance of a fully functioning single market. It's been crucial, I'm speaking to experts here, to get supplies of medicines and protective equipment where they are needed most, while also allowing critical workers to move where they can offer most support. And thirdly, international cooperation. The EU's leadership is absolutely critical in building the international consensus needed to solve the current crisis, and we all need to work on that. So, in addition, we are seeing tremendous efforts in Europe to mitigate the effects of this economic crisis. We are spending a lot of time on that, and you'll probably all have seen the European Commission put out just last week an ambitious economic recovery plan. AmCham EU supports that. In particular, we believe it has indeed put exactly the right emphasis on the single market, on green, and on digital as critical engines for this recovery. We've also released earlier this week a position paper that outlines short-term measures to address the ongoing crisis. I encourage you to look at that. It'll be on our website. And this focuses on 6 areas. And with the first one is on healthcare, the subject of today. So it focuses on healthcare, safety of workers, integrity of the single market, state aid measures, making sure that remains fair, and also the digital environment. So look at that. So let's move to today's topic and what we're all here for today, which is the Life Sciences Report. Now, COVID-19 is first and foremost a public health crisis. Healthcare, as mentioned, is a crucial sector of the single market, which directly affects the safety and well-being of our population. And our member companies here at AmCham provide everything from medicines to technologies to medical devices to the European continent and beyond, and they're working relentlessly on health outcomes. Now, the healthcare industry has already seen a lot of change over the last 10 years. Innovation has revolutionized healthcare, and it's also transforming the way that we deliver treatment and the way we organize our healthcare systems. So just before the beginning of the new EU legislative term of the European Parliament, AmCham's Healthcare Committee commissioned this report. I have it here. If those of you who don't have it, I've got the hard copy, which is Life Sciences for Europe, an integrated strategy for healthcare innovation 2019 to 2024. And the objective was to outline clear recommendations to respond to those changes that I just described. So basically what this report does, it reviews key trends and challenges in the healthcare sector, and importantly, it proposes a set of novel policy solutions to promote more favourable conditions, and is to incentivise innovation across the entire life sciences sector, allowing benefits to be delivered to patients across Europe. Now, it was first launched back in June of last year, but obviously, and this is the understatement, a lot has happened since then, and COVID-19 has brought to light a series of major challenges as our healthcare systems have been put under increased pressure. In the last month, we've seen shortages in medical supplies and equipment. We've seen a lack of hospital capacity, fragmented research and innovation landscape, and a policy framework that has not been equipped to support the rapid cross-border sharing of health data for research. So the innovative solutions we believe put forward in our report can serve as a starting point in discussions on how to increase the resilience of the EU health system. As we've seen governments across the EU instigate measures to kickstart the economy following confinement periods, now is the time to future-proof our health system for the benefit of all citizens. So with that, enough from me. I would like to thank the sponsors of this report. I would like to thank Abbott, AbbVie, AstraZeneca, Bristol Myers Squibb, Eli Lilly, GE Healthcare, Gilead Sciences, Johnson & Johnson, MSD, and Pfizer. Thank you all for your support. I'd also like to thank my colleague Francesca Lisso for organising this event and for all her support in getting us to where we are today. With no further ado, I'd like to give the floor to the moderator of today's event, who is Philip Schwab. He's Area Director of Government Affairs for Western Europe and Canada with AbbVie, and who represents our Healthcare Committee. In the meantime, please stay on Slido. You can access the Slido poll at any time because we're going to be asking some more questions. So with that, thank you to our panelists for joining us today. We really look forward to this event. Thanks to everybody involved in this study. Enjoy the event, be interactive, and over to you, Philip. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Susan. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be moderating this panel on this very important topic of life sciences in Europe. To kick us off today, what we thought we would do is have a bit of a review and overview of the report done by Anthony Barron from CRA. He's the principal in the life sciences practice at Charles Rivers Associates, CRA. And he has been the author of this study, and he's taken some time to update the study and the conclusions in light of the COVID-19 crisis. So over to you, Anthony, to start the discussion.
Thanks, Philip, for the introduction. So I'll start. So my name's, as introduced, my name's Anthony Barron. I'm a principal in the life science practice at CRA. CRA is a large management consultancy with a large life science practice, and I am a health economist by background and been working in health policy for about 10 to 12 years now, largely in Brussels. So so maybe we could move to move to the next slide already. Thanks. So we started this, as Susan said, we got contracted by AmCham. It was towards the end of 2018 when we started this project. And this was really based on the premise that the healthcare industry looks very different today than it did 10 years ago. There's been lots of new technologies coming on the market, the way we deliver treatment, the way we organize the healthcare systems, and we've seen revolutions in treatment options, especially in new sort of pharmaceutical technologies like gene and cell therapies, but also in medical devices, and now also in e-health. And nowhere, no time is this more evident than today in a public health crisis, where we're seeing sort of the emergence of these technologies being tremendously helpful. But what we also saw is while these technologies have their own distinct challenges, we can also observe that some of these technologies are now being used increasingly in an integrated fashion. And we're also seeing a lot of combined use of different technologies like pharmaceutical and diagnostics, especially in cancer, but also in medical devices and digital health. And all these four different categories and technologies in the life science sectors are now being used in a much more integrated fashion than they were before. And there was this was really based on the premise that this is offering sort of immense opportunities in terms of improving healthcare outcomes, but also improving health system efficiencies. But this is also proposing new challenges in terms of policy and how we react to that, to these technological changes. So there was a global sort of thinking that we needed to start having a look at things more holistically from a policy perspective, and perhaps consider where we see some common challenges across these four technologies and four different sectors, and look across and start putting a strategy and policy measures that look across the entire life science sectors. So this is really what brought on, the development of this research and this project. And I'll run you through some of the main elements today. So next slide, please. So this report was really about looking at some of these common challenges, and what it tries to do is come up with distinct policy solutions that are focused on these shared challenges. So we know there are plenty of policy solutions that are very specific to each technology and each sector. But the idea was really to highlight where we see some common challenges across these technologies, and I'll give some examples today of how this has become more and more obvious that we need shared policy solutions across the wider life science sector. But what we also try to do is come up with policy solutions until today. So there are plenty of issues like IP and pricing and novel pricing models that are already on the table. What we try to do is look out for policy solutions where we think that have been underexplored and really deserve some attention across the life science sector. But we also recognize that there's also a need for distinct regulatory landscape that are appropriate for individual health technology. So we're not arguing for a one-size-fits-all approach to all technologies, especially in terms of regulation. But the idea of this report is really to identify where we see common challenges, and especially where we can start thinking more holistically about the way we conduct policies in healthcare, and especially when it comes to how these technologies are being used in an integrated fashion or in a combined fashion. Next slide, please. So this report was published late, sort of mid last year, and this came very timely when we understood that there was the European Commission had released its work program for 2020, and we saw the launch of the pharmaceutical strategy, and really the idea was really to start sort of encouraging a more holistic strategy that considers not only pharmaceuticals but also how other technologies factor into that. And in light of that, there's also the European Cancer Plan, which was launched earlier this year, and I can't think of any better example of this sort of integrated policy need, where we see the integration of diagnostics and pharmaceuticals and medical device in cancer being used in combination, especially when we look at the emergence of personalized medicines, where we see companion diagnostics and personalized medicines being used together, and the increasing use of digital health and supporting treatment options. So the Cancer Plan was a very good example of where sort of a more integrated approach needs to be taken, and we'll explore a few examples of that throughout this presentation. Next slide, please. But as you know, the world has changed somewhat since earlier this year, and we've seen the emergence of a global pandemic, and this has led to obviously a serious public health crisis when it comes to the COVID pandemic, and I'm not going to go into the details of that. You're all familiar with that, as we're obviously in the thick of it at the moment. But what's important to understand is that the world has changed, and obviously some of our thinking has also changed. It will lead to significant changes in healthcare policies in the coming months, as we take stock of the lessons from this pandemic, and as some of our thinking has changed. So we're clearly going to see the acceleration of ongoing trend, especially when it comes to overall budget pressures and increased pressure on cost and on healthcare cost, and especially on drug and medical device prices, but also potentially the increased use of joint procurement and cross-border collaboration in procurement. But we're also seeing some step change activities in response to the crisis, especially when it comes to rethinking the way we sort of secure access to healthcare technologies. And you've seen some thinking around the relocation of industrial activity back to Europe, but also possibly a shift in resources from within clinical care, with more resources into hospitals, and a shift into more prevention and diagnosis. So this is all going to have an impact on the use of these technologies, but we're also seeing behavioral changes happening, especially a trend towards greater digitalization of healthcare systems. You've seen this with the use of telemedicine throughout the COVID crisis. This has become, telemedicine has a huge boost, and so has the use of e-health technologies, especially with the track and tracing for the COVID-19 sort of cases, but also a move towards perhaps greater protectionism as we start to think about relocalization, but also the value of recognition of science and research as it comes to sort of coming up with treatment options throughout this crisis. So we need to start taking stock of that and realize that this is going to change the way we think about healthcare policies. And in fact, looking at some of these considerations, I think it has given sort of strength to some of the policy recommendations that we came up on this report, and I think you'll find that some of these are more relevant than ever when we consider some of the ongoing changes that we're likely to see in the coming months. Okay, next slide, please. So we started this report by looking at some of the key trends stemming from the use of combined health technologies. What we wanted to do is to look out for future policy challenges, and the way to do this was to look at how some of the key trends have affected the healthcare sectors. So we looked at a socioeconomic trend, technological trend, and also policy and the evolving policy landscape to try to come up with some of the challenges that we're likely to see in the coming years. Socioeconomic trends clearly is about sort of demographic changes, but also the way that the economies are evolving in terms of more integrated economies and movements of population across Europe, and the need for greater interconnectedness and patient mobility. Technological trends, we've seen some huge increase and developments around personalized medicines, but also advanced therapies like gene and cell therapies that are changing the way we provide healthcare, that require specialized healthcare infrastructure and testing, but also changes in e-health and digital solutions, especially in light of the COVID crisis, for example, tracking applications for diagnosis new cases, and also policy landscape and how our regulatory framework is evolving, how we're reacting to affordability and funding issues, and how we're seeing countries organize themselves to procure jointly. So all this is going to lead to a set of opportunities, but also a set of challenges. And in fact, what we're seeing is, as I just mentioned, is to some extent the COVID crisis has really, strengthened some of these trends, especially in terms of the need for new technology. It's obviously induced some shift in the way we respond as multilateral organizations, but also countries, to the policy landscape. And so that's obviously leading to strengthening some of the existing challenges and obviously creating new ones. Next slide, please. So what we've done is we ended up coming up with a list of, looking at these trends, coming up with a list of some resulting challenges across the 4 different technologies, including medicines, medical device, digital health, and diagnostics technology. And what we try to do is focus on to what extent we observe some common challenges across these technologies, in the fact that they're used as a combination of technologies, but also to what extent we see some challenges linked to the integration of these technologies. And you'll see we've come up with sort of quite a few overlapping issues, including sort of the funding issues, the inconsistency in regulatory regime, the issues with value assessments and health technology assessment frameworks, but also issues like real-world evidence collection, cross-border collaboration. So all these have come up with a set of issues where we see are common to all 4 technologies and can give us an idea of where we can start acting more holistically. And what we've tried to do is to select 4 areas that are specifically sort of reflective of the combined use and integrated use of technologies, and where we haven't seen some clear novel policy development. So what we've tried to see sort of have been under addressed by policymakers and by member states at policy level, and try to see where we can explore some novel policy developments. So next slide, please. So what we've done is shortlisted 4 areas where we see that are of importance to the life science sector, but that we see have been perhaps under addressed by existing policy initiatives. And we obviously see some developments in some of these in some countries, but what we can see, there's going to be a greater need for action in the coming years. And you'll see, I think I've highlighted where probably some of these are more relevant than ever, especially when it comes to overcoming limited funding and budgeting issues. Here, what we observe is issues with with budget silos and the need to have integrated funding models. And by that, I mean, how can we break silos, for example, in health and social care, for example, is a good example. And we've seen this throughout the crisis, how health and social care services were totally divided. And this is partly due to the need to integrate services, but also integrate funding. We also see the need for multi-annual budgeting, where we see that most healthcare budgets are done on an annual basis, on a 12-month basis. But we see that the value of some of the technologies that are being used deliver values over the longer term. So how can we adjust our budgeting for long-term spending and to actually pick up the rewards of these technology over the long term, so we can adjust the affordability over the longer term rather than on an annual basis. The issue of holistic value assessment is also a key issue when it comes to certain treatments which have value beyond the healthcare system, especially in social care or in the labor market, for example. And how can we adapt the way we conduct value assessment to recognize the value that some of these technologies deliver beyond just the hospital or beyond the healthcare system on its own right. Okay, next and the second issue was introducing robust data protection issue. This is linked to the overall policy framework when it comes to digital health. And here what we've seen in the COVID crisis have provided a very good example of that is lack of interoperability and both horizontal and vertical when it comes to sharing data. First of all, maybe one issue that we hadn't picked up in this report, but that probably would have been picked up today, is the lack of harmonization in terms of data collection. We have all seen how different countries collect data in separate ways when it comes to COVID crisis, and we can't compare data across countries. But this is also true of how our healthcare systems and digital system work in terms of sharing information, patient data across member states, across different healthcare institutions. So this is one area that we see needs to improve significantly, and the COVID crisis has really magnified this issue. We also need to build trust in the digital health space in terms of ensuring regulatory clarity and legal certainty to ensure that healthcare professionals and patients alike have the trust to use digital health technologies and have the capacity also and the education and training to be able to cope with these changes in digital health and in healthcare interoperability of data. Thirdly, the issue of tailored approach to value assessment has always been an issue. It continues to be an issue as we will face an economic crisis and continued constraint on budgets. How can we start anticipating some of the new technologies that are arriving on the market and link some continued development around early dialogue in terms of what provides value? How can we identify what technologies we will be able to afford in the coming years and link that to horizon scanning in terms of budgeting? This is going to be essential as we struggle, as we shift our focus in terms of healthcare technologies, probably towards more preventative measures, but that we don't also forget existing commitments on cancer and rare diseases, and that we manage the affordability over time. Another issue is how do we sort of build up health technology assessment mechanisms to make sure that fit for purpose and that we have the right tool for the right technology. This is going to be an important element as well to look up to. And the last point is around adapting to new business models and healthcare sort of technologies, and this is really around the sort of wider strategy, life science sector strategies. How can we have a more joined up approach to policy when it comes to life science and healthcare? And that was the premise of this report, in fact, is consider health care policy more holistically, but also how we integrate these technologies. So really having a more joined up approach, and some components of that is also to start building industry partnerships and patient relationships and start integrating the different stakeholders in developing common solutions. And by that, I mean common solutions for research. We've seen IMI, for example, where we've seen public-private partnerships building to develop the right sort of innovation that we need, but also partnerships when it comes to commercialization of product, and work together towards finding solutions for affordability, but also commercial solutions when it comes to managing. We've seen some examples in managed equipment services where you have a joint sort of partnerships between the industry and healthcare providers in ensuring that the equipment, medical equipment, makes it into hospital. And the COVID crisis has shown how this can be doable, especially in recent months, to ensure that the equipment makes it in the right place at the right time. And for that, we also need more flexible and adaptable regulatory regime. And again, the COVID crisis have seen how, in time of crisis, we need some flexibility in the regulatory regime. We need speed of access. And obviously, we need that flexibility, but we also need robust regulatory regime to ensure that our healthcare technologies are safe and effective. So that means that we continue to adapt our regulatory regime to adapt to new technologies and can't sit with existing and dated regulatory structures. Okay, so I'll start wrapping up now in terms of what this really implies. What we mean here, next slide please, it's really to start developing more concrete measures to manage funding and budgeting issues. This is, for example, about sharing best practices around bundled payment schemes and pooled budgets. We've seen this in health and social care, how this has been done in a few countries, but also continue to foster longer-term planning around the adoption of innovation and identify new sort of budgeting practices that ensure that it recognize the long-term value of these technologies, and also find new innovative payment models and value-based payment models as part of this multi-annual budgeting practice, and recognize also the long-term and the wider value of innovation beyond just the healthcare systems into, for example, social care, labor markets, for example. We also need to tailor our approach to value assessment, and this means sort of finding ways that we can integrate, sort of conduct holistic value assessment, but also recognize that this is necessarily a one-size-fits-all, and we need to also recognize that different technologies have different needs. So this is really to find a more adaptable set, a more flexible value assessment system that recognizes the value of each technology. Next slide. And lastly, around data protection, this is going to be largely about building trust in digital health and digital data solutions and e-health data solutions and mHealth. And as I said already, this is about building interoperability, but also building the capacity of healthcare professionals and patients and other stakeholders involved in the evolution of e-health and mHealth to not only have trust in the system, but also have the capacity to understand how it works, and have some clarity over the use of data, but also the interoperability of data. All this needs to be strengthened, especially as we've seen the boost that telehealth and e-health have had during the COVID crisis, and we've seen some of the gaps in policy and framework around telehealth and e-health that we need to fill. So this is going to be a huge priority in the coming months, and will have significant impact on efficiencies of healthcare system, which is going to be crucial in the post-COVID era, I believe. And the last point is around the need for an industrial strategy that's more holistic, rather than thinking about purely pharmaceuticals and the need for a competitive environment. How can we start thinking about the wider competitiveness of the healthcare sector as a whole, and to introduce a comprehensive industrial strategy that covers technologies more holistically, especially as we've seen in cancer, the use of diagnostics, medical technologies, e-health, and pharmaceuticals being more integrated. Same thing with COVID. All these now require common use of technologies, and therefore an industrial strategy that recognizes the value of all these technologies, and also starts to build partnerships with different actors to provide not only the innovation we need, but also the access and the affordability solutions that are needed in time of restricted healthcare budgets, and in time of where we're going to start shifting some of our focus more into prevention and more into ensuring that we have sufficient, more resilient healthcare systems. So this is going to be a fundamental element to start considering in the next few months and years. So I think that's it for me. I'll take any questions, obviously, from the panel and from any participants if needed.
Very good, Anthony. Thank you very, very much for that very comprehensive overview of the report and of many of the challenges that the life sciences industry faces pre-COVID and especially post-COVID, as we look to really contribute and partner with governments across Europe to bring new solutions for the COVID patients and for patients who are suffering from chronic diseases, cancer, and other ailments, as we normally would expect. I think this is a really appropriate time for us to be having this discussion and to be launching this debate around these principles. Even before COVID, we had a number of activities that were planned or were happening already in the health space across the European institutions. But now, as we look to see what is happening at exactly this moment, when the previously referenced EU Beating Cancer strategy that was launched earlier this year. Currently, the Parliament is debating the report on shortages, currently, right now. Just yesterday, we had the release of the pharmaceutical strategy roadmap for the EU, and a week or so ago, we had the release of the EU for Health plan with an extra 9.4 billion euros proposed to be contributed to health, and all of the policies and associated issues that went along with that. So really, there are a number of issues currently bubbling on the life sciences agenda in the EU. So a great time to have this panel, and I think we have the results of our Slido poll that many of you have contributed to, and that will be the basis for our kickoff to the panel. So I think, Francesca, are you going to put up the results of the Slido poll for us to see right now? I think that's meant to be coming up. And here we go. So based on the report, what in your opinion are the most pertinent challenges we need to overcome to build a resilient life sciences sector? Most popular answer, issues with data sharing, consistency, and interoperability. Certainly that has been an issue during the COVID crisis, and certainly that is something that concerns many of our life sciences industry sector partners. Maintaining a robust innovation environment for new technologies, absolutely critically important. We saw absolutely a need for new pharmaceuticals, new vaccines, new diagnostics, ramping up in medical devices, new ways of approaching manufacturing of medical devices. We need to have that robust, innovative environment. Equal access of all patients to innovative treatments. Still, this is absolutely important. We saw again this critical need as shortages of medicines and medical devices rippled across the European Union. And limited funding and budget silos. We all know that's going to be an issue, but perhaps some of these other enabling issues can help us use our budgets, our limited budgets, more efficiently. So thank you for that poll. That gives us a little bit of a frame as we go to our panelists. So kicking off our response to the poll, to the environment, to the issues, we wanted to start with our panelist from the European Parliament, Susana Solis Perez, who is a member of the European Parliament from Spain and from the Renew Europe party. So we'll start with her, and then we'll move on to Andres Ruiz, who is the director who's responsible for health systems, medical products, and innovation at DG Sante. And hopefully we'll have some comments there on the newly released roadmap for the EU pharmaceutical strategy. So MEP Solis Perez, would you please kick off the response on our panel?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Yes, and we can.
Sorry. So thank you very much, Philip, and thank you, Sam, for inviting me to participate in this event, especially at such a timely moment like this, as you mentioned, just when the European Commission is presenting the recovery plan for Europe, and there are so many files being discussed in the European Parliament. Because this pandemic has caused a huge impact on the healthcare systems, as you mentioned, and what this crisis has proven is that the urgent need for a joint action and solidarity to cope with this type of unprecedented crisis. And not only that, the pandemic made us realize the need to rethink the healthcare systems, as well as the vital role that new technologies can play to make our healthcare systems more resilient and to withstand hard moments such as the ones we have witnessed in the past months. And I have to mention something, because much has been said about the EU not doing enough to coordinate the healthcare answers. But we must remember that the EU does not have competencies over healthcare systems in the member states. But nevertheless, all the states in the EU face common challenges in terms of health, and I strongly believe that we should all tackle this jointly. And in this sense, the report by Anthony is now more relevant than ever, since it gives us a very accurate picture of the main issues we have been facing through the years, and now those barriers and limitations have been further amplified by the crisis. And I would like to highlight some priorities we are discussing in the European Parliament in relation with the poll that has been answered by the hearers. And first of all, of course, we need a more resilient health system, and that will be one of the pillars of the recovery plan launched by the European Commission. You mentioned this health program with a 9.4 billion euros to tackle the problems caused by the virus. But this is not enough. The crisis has sharpened the need for Europe to strengthen the resilience of critical industry supplies, including pharmaceutical ingredients. And the Commission published the industrial strategy. Now they are presenting the pharmaceutical roadmap. But I will defend that the European industrial strategy needs to address and reinforce the reliability of our supply chains, diversify sources, and cut the risks of interruptions, but also building domestic capacity in crucial sectors such as pharmaceuticals. And you mentioned also the shortage of medicines. Shortages of medicines has always been a concern from the member states, but the situation has been exacerbated by the pandemic due to the high surge in demand in all affected countries. And as you mentioned, in the European Parliament, we are working on an own initiative report in the MB committee addressing the problem of medicine shortages. And I think this response must be based on three pillars. A return to health sovereignty by security and supplies in the EU, stepping up European action to better coordinate and supplement member state health policies, and enhancing cooperation between them. And you also mentioned research and innovation. Now, more ever, it's the time to invest in innovation. And we need to recognize the greater value of innovation to combat, to detect, and the virus. Science and research has helped and will continue to help to detect the virus, and the role of innovation must be key in the recovery. Another issue would be to have a more digitalized health system. I think the health sector will be more digitalized after the lesson learned from COVID-19, because it has given us the chance to introduce and develop certain technologies that will be key to ensure the sustainability of the sector. I mean, for example, the increase of video consultation and remote monitoring, the creation of apps to trace infections and patients, and by raising initiatives to harness data and analytic capabilities to prevent and monitor the development of the pandemic. These tools can be also essential to cope with the challenges that the health sector is facing. And data sharing and interoperability. I think this is key to achieve all the EU's potential in this recovery. And that was also the first answer, the more voted answer in the poll, to deal with the issues with data sharing, consistency, and interoperability. For me, this is the vital importance, and this is why we need to create, without delay, a European health data space as a part of this European data strategy. That should be our priority, one of our priorities in the recovery of Europe. You know, we have these main priorities, a digital Europe and a green Europe, but the European data strategy is more necessary than ever. And I firmly believe that one of the solutions to cope with crises like this would entail counting on a common European data infrastructure, where the interoperability of the data should be a key pillar, while, of course, always respecting and protecting privacy and personal data. And finally, I wanted to mention cancer. Cancer didn't stop after coronavirus. beating cancer was a high priority before the COVID crisis, and it will be still a high priority in the recovery plan. It is in our agenda, and we are still working on and the European Commission is working in the beating cancer plan. And from my role as a member of the European Parliament, I am going to make sure that from the EU we continue fighting against cancer, and we are all committed to this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susanna. It's really a pleasure to hear your comprehensive overview of the whole parliamentary activity that's being planned. So thank you very much. Director Rees, could we turn to you, please, for your perspective on the issues?
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for this invitation. You know, I also had a chance to see the first time Anthony on video screen. This is the COVID benefit. So because we spoke over the phone when the report was developed, and I had contributed to this report. So I also shared a number of ideas, you know, the R&D report, and I did congratulate, you know, to him already in one of my emails some months ago, and of course for you as a sponsor of the I think it's also a good report. This is well balanced and a number of good ideas. But after presentation, of course I have to also answer to the number of challenges. So first, starting from timely challenge. So we finally published the roadmap of our EU pharmaceutical strategy, which was announced, you know, earlier this year by our president. So now we know that we have to deliver by the fourth quarter of this year, and simultaneously we'll start public consultation. So you will see most of next week the questions, the public open consultations. Of course, everyone welcome to share ideas and reach our debate before we try to frame the final concept. As you have seen, the strategy is based on the 4 pillars, and this is important to see this. You know, on one hand they have this kind of approach around the access and availability of pharmaceutical to patients, and of course it's also linked to the supply chain and the way medicines can be get to the patients. The second, of course, is affordability of medicines and then keeping balance, fiscal balance and fiscal sustainability of health system, which is other important part of this debate we also have in the report. But there are also important parts concerning the innovations, including also unmet needs, and the current crisis also show that COVID and then SARS already, you know, we knew that there are issues, that difficulties to create, for example, vaccines against corona. We already have seen this after SARS. We have seen this after MERS experience, and a number of developments that scientific developments were not easy, and now we are confronted in the crisis with a lot of scientific technological challenges. So this is of course linked also to reduce the environment footprint, and I think in the questions we just got answers. You know, you have seen that this is also reflected in your heads when you think about the priorities. And finally, of course, is the big question, you know, how Europe and the president of the chamber, she already said, you know, the global influence of European Union is very important, and I think this crisis also showed that the EU leadership is needed. You know, I hope it's also welcome, at least by some, and this may be something we can discuss. But of course, in the leadership, we have the issues around the competitiveness of our industry and the way we play on the global market. But of course, for regulators, so Commission and European Medicine Agency, also important that we are important player on the regulatory science field, and we collaborate. So there are pillars, but then of course they are important to say. This is something which Antonio also mentioned about this cross-sector thinking, and I think that we will do it, and you should see also, and I think in the answering to the questions, but also in the debates we'll have during next month, I hope we should see this also in the context of Green Deal. This is an important pillar of our Commission strategy. Data strategy, already mentioned several times, is also the pillar. Digital part is important one, I think already mentioned, and also international. But a number of other policies we are developing, like chemical strategy, like industrial strategy. So it cannot be in vacuum, the pharma strategy. But of course, the other big questions for today's debate is something which is the core of this report, about the cross-sectoral strategy, life sciences. So how pharma can be linked to medical devices, to in vitro diagnostic, to of course health professionals, training programs, availability of health professionals, or even skill mix, or the way we are approaching the future services, personalized medicines, and so on. So there are also other policies area we develop simultaneously. We should not forget when we discuss value-based medicines or value for money concept and so on. We have also health technology assessment regulations still under negotiations. So it's important to see this in the context of our approach, and we continue also make sure that the HTA is active, and you can also see the trace of HTA activities during COVID crisis. And I think it's a good moment to go to the COVID few COVID lessons, because this was in the last slide presented by Anthony. So this is my second kind of big global crisis I have chance to be in. I mean, I was in H1N1 pandemic management on global level, but this, of course, the comparison is in one hand is difficult, but of course is also important. But I think also is interesting to see what's happened. So what's happened now? I think the magnitude of crisis and cross-sectoral, including also disruption on the internal market, was much bigger. But at the same time, we don't have still vaccine. We don't even have the treatment option for COVID. Many medicines are still under virals, or therapies under development. But at the same time, we learn, lessons, which I will try to echo few of them. Of course, this lessons learned exercise is starting, but you will see. The first, I think, the good news already mentioned by Susan is that we also respond, to this relatively quickly. When you just close your eyes and you think that the crisis started only, at least on this kind of EU global stage, only in March, and we are just beginning of June, and you see how many things were possible, starting from the way we act. Some people say maybe we're too late, but when you see in the speed of decisions and the regulatory decisions, we can spend almost one day to explain how this was going. The response to shortages problem in ICU medicines, collaboration between us as regulators and policymakers and industry, both pharma, medical devices, so going down to the production level, trying to help, to change production line, for PPE, for example, or even to ventilators. All these things happen in few weeks. We also respond with the money proposal. EU for Health proposal is almost 10 billion budget, proposed by the Commission. But the budget is one important factor, which of course, we see is as an important one. But when you see the context of the program, I really welcome you to read it. There are respond to a number of areas, including medicines and medical devices, including the cross-sectoral activity, including the training program for health professionals, which was mentioned as one of the important one, building up digital skills, building up the response capacity, and so on. So we'll continue our work. I think Sante is also in quite unique situation now because we have all puzzles in our kind of responsibility. We regulate medicines, we regulate medical devices. We work with through the European semesters. We work with member states and then through collaboration with DG Regio, DG Employment on the funds allocations. We cooperate with European investment banks. We work very closely with colleagues from DG RTD. We should not forget also when you see the budget for health, research in health is also increasing budget, at least in the proposal of the Commission. We should not forget we were working closely with you on the new proposal for public-private partnership, which will bring those three sectors, which I think was most probably my dream when we discussed about bringing those sectors and devices still on the development. So I can tell you, crisis is terribly difficult. We really got many lessons, but I think we prepare good response, and now it's time also to deliver. I don't know how much more energy we need for this, but this is the other big questions to all of us. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Director Rees. I think we're all going to need a lot of energy to get through the issues that we have to address going forward. So hopefully we will approach these challenges with as much energy and fortitude as we have over the past 2 months. And certainly from the standpoint of somebody who's been involved with the weekly discussions between the Commission, the Health Commissioner, the Internal Markets Commissioner, EMA, yourself. I think industry as a whole, the device industry, the API industry, the pharmaceutical industry, vaccine industry, really appreciated the speed and the creativity that has been demonstrated throughout the crisis to address the issues of our health system across the continent. So we're looking forward to having that same enthusiasm and creativity as we move forward in this pharmaceutical strategy. I think we're all looking for that. Anthony, I would ask you now if you just have some brief comments on the prioritization of the issues before we move to a more open general discussion. Anthony, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah. I didn't understand your question. What are the priorities you mean, or?
Well, we saw that the priority that came out on the poll was interoperability of data, and budget was on the bottom. So based on that poll, do you have any reflections on those prioritizations before we move to a?
Well, the sharing, the interoperability of data, that was also by choice. I think that's probably the most current issue at the moment, which has become so obvious to all of us how important it is to have interoperability of data and have trust in digital health, because that's going to be a major issue at stake over the next few months. But I think I'm not sure that is necessarily the only priority. We know that because of the crisis, we've had a healthcare crisis, but we're about to have a significant economic crisis. And that's going to have significant impact on healthcare budgets, on the way we allocate resources in healthcare. Because of the crisis, there's likely to be a shift in how resources are allocated. And what I think is important is that we also don't forget and don't ignore certain diseases. As we reallocate resources, that we also ensure that our existing commitments towards certain types of groups of patients are also maintained. And I'm thinking especially cancer patients and rare disease patients who tend to require quite significant resources, and there's been a significant priority over these patients over the past few years. And yes, we have had issues with a communicable disease like COVID, and we do need to adjust our healthcare systems and make them more resilient to these kind of diseases. But long-term chronic disease is also a significant issue and have a significant impact on patients and on mortality, and therefore we're going to have to adapt, and really think about the economics of healthcare in the next few months and ensure that budgets and affordability and access remains on the forefront. So I think there's probably a staggered set of priorities over time for some of these issues. We need to fix the digital healthcare platform and environment and framework, but the access to healthcare technologies remains crucial.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good kick up for one of my questions as we look toward this debate to come, toward the situation to come, and that is how do we keep the forward-looking innovation that cancer patients need, that patients who are suffering from other chronic conditions that are going to need. How do we keep that innovation engine going at the same time that we are looking backward at what we needed to do for COVID? So as we're looking toward toward more manufacturing capacity in Europe, we're looking toward that potential reallocation of budgets toward infectious disease versus chronic disease and cancer. How do we make sure that we keep the right incentives going forward for innovation in devices and medicines and diagnostics while we're dealing with the current crisis? Director Rees or MEP Solis-Perez, any thoughts on how we balance those two?
If I may start, and I think it's a very, very, very important question, because we see also during COVID, and this is now more and more evidence that COVID also created trouble for patients, with the chronic diseases, with the rare diseases, despite of the effort, of doctors and health systems and even payers, as we see the response to the digital solutions. Some of countries, they were very lucky that, for example, the electronic prescription, they were introduced, ahead of crisis, and I see this also as a patient, that in Belgium, if I need my consultation, I am getting my prescription online, and this is still unbelievable that I can go to the pharmacy and she can deliver my medicine, and imagine, that this of course was not COVID which triggered this, because this hard work of minister and colleagues from Belgian government to push this, last years, and then finally it's held. But going back to the balance between the investment and so on, COVID, when we go back to the question how much investment we didn't do for vaccines development, we had this discussion when we passed the pandemic in H1N1. I remember that was a big question, what is our capacity to produce the influenza vaccines, and of course industry came with the answer to keep capacity running. We need to at least to reach targets. We established ourselves, through WHO, to our scientific development, that we need target of vaccination for seasonal flu vaccine. Result was that no one country, only UK, was able to reach the target of seasonal flu vaccine as agreed together. And many countries and many populations, for a number of reasons, they never reach, even they were, percentage of the agreed target. And of course, the consequence is that we were not able to kind of keep the capacity of production of influenza vaccines in Europe. So there is a link between the policy making and commitment of the public this administration, but also same time, the willingness of be vaccinated by population. So we just other example which we face in the vaccine field, industry in many numbers of discussion, you tell us, if you like to make vaccines available, it's better when we have more kind of integrated and coordinated vaccination programs across EU, because then you can deliver, vaccines that they are, let's say, same vaccines for the European population. it's so difficult to establish because of those vaccine schedules. We try as a commission. Member states really work hard to come with this idea together last year, but still to get to the more harmonized calendar of vaccine calendars is a tricky issue. And then I think this is the dilemma. How much the policy making can help with the industrial developments. Of course, the same goes to the cancer, for example. When we just pick up this one, we would like to make sure that as we discuss shortages, that at least for those medicines, they are traditionally and good medicines for cancer treatment, but in shortages. What we have to do those medicines are available to the. We are not speaking about expensive, medicines that are available now to the patient. We're speaking about those medicines that are needed and they are on shortages. So I think that there's also a dilemma we have to look for the solution. But I think now it's time for
definitely. Ms. Perez. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, just to say, I completely agree with you, with you mentioned before. Just to add, we need to make sure that we allocate enough resources to innovation, to research, and this is important. And it was a good step in this recovery plan that we reinforced the health system with this 9.4 million, but also the Horizon Program Europe, because this is critical. Before the COVID-19, we had some proposals from the Council to reduce the Horizon Program. It cannot. We need to fight to strengthen the program. The new proposal strengthen the Horizon Program. This is a very good start, because we need to allocate resources, for example, to the mission of cancer. You know that we are going to start the mission in the coming months, and we need to allocate resources. We are talking about a new mission on health in the future, so it would be possible if we have the enough budget in the coming months, and also to invest it in the public-private partnership. So it is critical that we have and will fight for the budget at the European level, in the European Parliament, and also at national levels, because as I mentioned before, many of the competencies are at national levels. We cannot repeat the faults from the last crisis. I come from a country, Spain, where we have reduced the budget on innovation and in research during the last crisis. We cannot repeat this. And with this recovery plan, we have to make sure that the money and the funds go to the member states to invest in innovation, in industry, in digital, in environment. But that is also our. We need to make sure that the money is invested in our future, and our future is our health.
Very good, very good. I think that's a very clear message, a very clear statement on behalf of maintaining the innovative nature of this industry. One of the questions that's come in, it's a bit granular, but it's an interesting one given the number of things that are happening all at once, and that is the relationship between the EU pharmaceutical strategy and the EU for Health program. And how do you see those integrating? There are certain elements of overlap, and there are certain elements that are distinct in each of them, and they may move at different speeds. So maybe a bit of a granular question, but something that I know I'm personally interested in, and a couple of our other participants are as well.
Okay, so EU Health EU for Health program, I'm still learning the title, is structured the way that, as you see the annex, there is a part which is linked to the medicines and medical devices, And first, what is important that we continue to support the implementation of the regulations. Just give you an example from medical devices field. Building up the UDAMED database, standardization, just going back to Antoni's points, nomenclature, that we are operating in Europe in 23 languages, so all these things has to be also linked to the different languages. By the way, we also are helping WHO because we are building with WHO this nomenclature system, which I think also would be our input to the global development, because many countries, of course, are using Spanish or Portuguese or French language. So we're investing somehow through this program also to the global development. But of course, there are many other implementing measures. They have to be supported with money. Then we have the money, for example, we would like, because there's a link between European Health Data Space project. European Health Data Space, is a lot about governance, but also about infrastructure. We allowed also, which maybe is a granularity of this program, that money can be used also for the regulators like European Medicines Agency and national agencies. So this allowed us to build something. This is our dream as well. The project is called entitled Darwin, which allowed to collection of data, real world data to the hospitals and so on. So very much mirroring what is happening in the US. So I think we are, so the money will help us to build up, but of course we need also time. Yesterday I was co-chairing meeting European e-health network, which is a very important governance tool for us to build out together with member states. So of course the number of so it's not only money, because money. Even regulatory framework they will not change the way the infrastructure is built and connected through whole Europe. So we need time. Member states need time. It's not because they don't like to do this. Simply that the systems are so complex and so different that to get this common kind of connectivity, it simply takes time. Because we should not forget that part of the deal is that the data will be secure and privacy of the patients and us as the citizens will be under control. So to get the deal done, we need also build the secure system, and then this also needs time and governance as well.
Yes. Okay. So you see the major link as one on the data space and digital issues.
Yeah, this from investment point of view, yes. There's also money for the European Reference Network. We also introduced which allowed basically the system fly now with additional resources. But of course, there will be attached conditions. It's not money. We would like to spend money wisely as well, jointly with member states, of course. And lastly, is important that there is also a way to increase the clinical knowledge. And for example, the program for exchange program for professionals is also important, because what we learned this crisis, you can build a field hospital for 1,000 beds, but to get nurses, doctors trained and ready to go to the patient's bed and spend shifts and days and nights with patients, you simply need trained people. So we like also to get the program which allows exchange of young professionals or experienced professionals. We are starting now the first pilot for European Reference Networks, where, for example, trained surgeons can go to other places like neurosurgeons and operate, show their skills, and also help with the skills development in other countries. So this is already
very good
piloting.
Yeah, personnel and human resources are definitely one of the key issues that we learned about during this crisis as well. MEP Solis Beres, do you have any perspective on the interaction between the EU for Health and the pharmaceutical strategy? You're on mute again.
Sorry, I haven't seen the roadmap from the Commission yet, but I have a special issue with the pharmaceutical strategy. What we need is important because we need to stimulate investment in existing manufacturing and security to secure to reduce the dependence for medicines on third countries. And for me, a comprehensive pharmaceutical strategy should map also the existing European production. I have seen we have more than 400 manufacturing sites in Europe, just for generic. But we need to stimulate and create incentives and competition measures to stimulate investments in manufacturing for Europe. And we need to have to strengthen the European supply chain. And in the future, we need to rethink the role of Europe in this technological sovereignty, and without, of course, forgetting our European values as free competition and economic liberalism. But we need to rethink, and I wanted to ask the Commission if it is in the roadmap of the pharmaceutical strategy, the role of Europe to secure the supply chain in pharmaceuticals, and if there is a strategy to bring here and to make sure that we have the manufacturing here in Europe.
I'm gonna jump in here because that was really sort of the frame of my final question for the three of you on the panel. Before I go there, I'd just like to remind folks that we're going to wrap up with one last go at the Sligo. Is it Sligo? And then we're going to do a word cloud. So if you while we're wrapping up here with our final questions, if you go back to the Slido, we're going to ask you to enter in your one or two words that sum up the issue for our final wrap up. But for our final question, by definition, we're members of an international organization. Many of us U.S. headquartered. All of us probably having U.S. operations here at AmCham EU. And so as we look at the pharmaceutical strategy, as we look at the EU for Health strategy, and much of the rhetoric around increasing the manufacturing capacity in Europe, securing supply chains for Europe, many of our members are wondering, what does that mean in terms of the international relationships, in terms of the complex supply chains that we have for devices, medicines, and diagnostics? How do you see that balance moving forward for those of us like my company, which has 11 manufacturing sites in Europe, over 12,000 employees, but also significant manufacturing in the United States and some in Asia? How do we balance that pull for the European supply, but also recognizing the international aspect and global aspect of our companies? So that would be my final question to the panel.
Yeah, it's very much question around the squaring the cycle. So we are in this dialogue. I mean, we started this dialogue also with you, with industry, and most probably next month we should very intensify this dialogue, because I think we are between a number of dilemmas we have to face. COVID for sure showed that dependency on sometimes on one or two manufacturers, in India or China. They produce APIs for global market. Maybe is going too far. But at the same time, of course, we have the big question. What is the definition of the security of supply? Which kind of products are it is because of diabetes, or maybe just the kind of disease which many has, or cardiac medicines for hypertension, as we face, for example, problem with the impurities due to nitrosamine problems now, or this is because of the antibiotics or vaccines or antivirals that are needed for the infection disease control. So I put this in the extreme because that also you can put it in the middle, something which is many of companies interested for innovative medicines, when we have even now current situation with the antiviral, which is produced so far only in the US, and who knows where will be the next production facility. So I think so this dilemma we have to discuss, but this is the one part of the problem. But other part of the problem is, that we see, and I think in the Parliament report this would be also reflected. There is a problem with the shortages, which depends on the number of issues we have to really fix, because that is what's the obligation of supply, and what is the finally for industry as you supply. So how for example it will change the pricing structure for especially for generics, because there are most of shortages are linked to the generics, and what we can accept as a payers, what is the limit of this pricing. But when we study a little bit, just give you at least our discussion with APIs producers in Europe. According to the estimates, that the price of the APIs is influencing the final price only 4%. So I really don't easily this dilemma, the pricing dilemma is real dilemma. But of course, we know there are many others. The complex supply chains, your contractual relations, the preparation of the regulatory dossier is expensive as well. So this also builds, all kinds of difficulties. So just in the final, so we have to discuss this again horizontally. What if there will be repatriation of some production? Of course, it should be done also in the Green Deal framework, so environment friendly technology. So we need to support R&D in the fine chemicals industry. We need to build, still continue to build the double supply, most probably triple supply chains. Maybe US, EU arrangements should be re-established and really find the solutions. But of course, we have seen also threats of this. The burning case also show us, the problems we may also face. This can be also used by in the trade difficult situation. So let's see what is feasible. Our producers, I remember the Spanish producer of APIs, the CEO of the company told me, she is still selling the US because EU made is seen by the US market as a very good quality. So let's also see the EU or US made as a good quality. Maybe we should start to again make business better together. So I don't have all answers but we should continue this dialogue, and we should really try to fix the problem, because I think for the citizens, for politicians, it's not acceptable anymore that you have 500, 600 notification of the shortages country like Belgium in last year, so, and every day sometimes. Thank you.
Very good, very good. Anthony, do you have something to say on this issue between domestic production?
Not very much, other than I think what we'll need at some point is a thorough investigation of the lessons from this pandemic and what went wrong and what went well. I think there's been a lot of knee-jerk reactions in terms of trying to fix problems without having fully investigated where the issues were, especially in terms of supply chain, in terms of flow. So I think it's fully acknowledged that there were some supply issues throughout the crisis, but what I would like to see is full investigation at national level from each member state, but also at EU level as to what actually were the problems, where did they come from, and how do we find solutions to fix them. We need to really think about this again holistically. If we're going to rethink about relocalization of manufacturing, how is that going to solve a problem? And where was the problem in the first place? So I think this will need to be part of a wider investigation and a collaboration between industry and policymakers to ensure that by fixing one problem, we don't create another. As we all talked about, supply chains, manufacturing and supply chains are international, they're interconnected. Even if something is EU made, it doesn't mean it's fully made in the EU or fully made in the US. It's parts, as API in manufacturing, especially in medical devices, some parts are coming from everywhere in the world. So, it's not as easy as just saying we're going to relocalize to another country. We may need to think about, what elements we want to relocalize, what makes sense, and how do we actually address the issues. And I think what we may need to do is wait for the end of this crisis take stock of what happened, especially what went particularly wrong, but also what went particularly well, and draw some conclusions when we're rested on this. So that would be my only comment, is that that knee-jerk reactions is never really a good way forward in most cases.
Good. MEP Perez, what is your thoughts on this balance between European and international?
Yes, I think we need to find this balance, and it's not about protectionism. We need to think what we need to relocalize to make our strategic value chains more resilient. But we need to keep in mind our European values of free competition. And yes, and I think we have enough capacity in Europe. We have many production sites, as you mentioned, but we need a better cooperation also. And that's something that needs to be addressed again. And then in the future, how to think and what will be to keep our sovereignty, what is needed to bring back in Europe. But of course, it's not about protectionism. I think it would be horrible if we start thinking in protectionism, but to know what is strategic for our security and for future pandemics.
Very good, very good. That's a reassuring perspective. Thank you. Well, I want to flash up our Slido word cloud before I invite our three speakers to give their final speed roundup. And in one or two words, please describe what could make life sciences in Europe more integrated and resilient. And the clear and away winner is innovation. I think most of us around the table may have said that at the beginning of this crisis. I think we've, as I mentioned, certainly seen a lot of innovation on the company level, on the institutional level, on the member state level, political level. We've seen a lot of innovation over the past 2.5 months, and hopefully we can keep that spirit moving forward. So in reverse order, I'd say, Anthony, do you want to make any final closing comments?
I think not too much to say. I think it's great to hear that there's some consensus for the need to continue to build resilient healthcare systems and to take a balanced approach to how to solve the challenges over the next few months and years. And I think we all seem to agree on the fact that we need to build a strong life science sectors, but also at the same time we need to balance that against some of the other challenges like access, affordability, and building innovation. So I think that will require a lot of dialogue and working together.
Very good. Director Rees, any final thoughts from your side?
Me?
Yeah, I will pick up the word of cooperation, because I think the cross-sectoral thing is need cooperation, and I see innovation through the cooperation. Everybody should really try to think first. Who is my partner? How I can do better. And the COVID also showed that when you are partnering, I see this in the I remember the few months ago, I spoke to the virologist who couldn't find the good relationship with the clinics. And since few weeks they are, on the same page, every day. But few months ago they couldn't, really speak, So COVID also make friends, Thank you.
Very good. And finally, MEP Susana Solis Perez, your final comments, please.
I would like to say that we need to tackle this crisis with a unified European response, that the introduction of technology and innovation is critical, but it will imply a huge transformation on the healthcare system and requires the training of the healthcare workers. It implies to have the proper digital skills that we didn't talk about this, but we need to bear in mind that these technological change will never replace also the human factor. They must always be human-centered and respect all ethical and privacy considerations. And finally, that we must always bear in mind that investments must keep continuing over time to ensure the research and development of technologies and treatments. So this is my concern and my fear.
Very good, very good. Well, I want to thank all of you for the time today. I think it's been a very fruitful discussion. We've covered a lot of ground, both in terms of what we faced over the past few months and what we're looking forward to in the future. A lot of work ahead of us in the health field, both on the industry side, on the commission side, on the parliament side, and the council side. We've got a big challenge ahead of us to make this health system in Europe more robust, more resilient. But I feel like we have a solid partnership to really work forward into the future on. So I'll thank again our panelists. Thanks to the sponsors of this report who have now been flashed up on the screen. And thank you very much to Susan Danger and the team at AmCham EU for excellent setup and technical assistance today. Susan, anything final from your side?
No, not at all. I just flashed myself up there to make sure you knew I was still here and to say thank you very much for moderating, Philip. Thanks for leading throughout this. Thanks to all our panelists for the great discussion. And we look forward now to moving forward as some of those words were summed up at the end: cooperation, partnership, and innovation. So excellent discussion. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you all, and we'll be seeing you soon for so many of these topics on follow-up. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.